Hey, so I'm going to make this as short as possible. Hopefully you watch till the end. Basically, you've stated that firearms should stay legal because it would mainly increase self-defense and well-being in general. Now, I would argue that's not the case, and here's why. So let's say the average person has a firearm. Now, I'd imagine those most likely to buy one would be largely people who feel they might need to protect themselves. People who feel aggressed easily and want to know they can have the upper hand if anything were to happen, probably because things do tend to happen with them. Now, we've said before that you're in favor of open carry, being allowed to walk in the streets with a firearm because, after all, you can get raped in the streets too. Now, if that were allowed, as a person who's lived in Louisiana for 14 years, I could say with confidence that a good 1 in 20 people at the bare minimum would carry their firearm around them at all times were they allowed to do so. People who actually believe and preach that the second firearms are taken from them, the government as well as the Fortnite default skin community, or whatever the fucking conspiracy is now, is going to pounce on them to silence the inner strength of their brain-damaged Twitter feed. These people are all over the place, and a lot of them, as you might imagine, have a really short temper. Not a lot as in close to 50%, but a lot as in lots more, quantitatively speaking, than, say, the amount of people who may live to see a situation where their gun saves an innocent life. So the question here is, how do we compare the ups and downs of the Second Amendment in terms of unwarranted fatalities? In other words, given a first world country where guns are legal versus where they aren't legal, say the United States versus the libtard country of France where I come from, do total fatalities due to gun crime that wouldn't happen as much if guns were legal and therefore harder to obtain, do those account for more fatalities than incidents of self-defense where innocent lives are clearly saved as opposed to taken? Of course, everyone loves to point to school shootings because that's where all the drama is, and those deaths are clearly unjustified. And the obvious counterpoint to that is deaths from school shootings make up such a ridiculously small portion of overall deaths in terms of gun violence that, other than for shock value, they don't have much statistical weight. But France doesn't only have a lower rate of mass shootings as opposed to the United States, as I'll get into, but first it's important to point out that as much as school shooting deaths are very much overemphasized, self-defense cases aren't so different. So through all my years from second grade to graduating high school, I've yet to meet someone who owes their life to self-defense. Yet to have known somebody who was mugged and killed, in the streets or in their home at night, anywhere in any way. I have yet to hear anyone mention that someone they claim to know took a life to save one. Self-defense does happen, and these incidents individually have the dramatic influence that hundreds of deaths total from heart disease incidents might never have. Now, I am fully aware that this is only an anecdote, and, well, to be fair, that's about all I have, because I don't do research, because I'm a fucking loser, but when it comes down to it, I don't really think it matters here, because I think my anecdote alone holds enough weight to make a valid point. Now, with the horizons of my experience being the thousands I've met throughout the years, I've never heard anyone say that they had once witnessed their house being broken into. Never. I've only ever heard from less than 10 people that their house or property had been robbed. Couldn't have heard more than 30 times or so of any incident where someone said they knew somebody who was victim of a break-in. We can of course add to that a good 5 occasions of street violence gone wrong, except it happening to someone who knew the person who at the time mentioned it. And obviously the point of bringing up specifically break-ins and street muggings is that those are, as far as I could imagine, the bulk of what people anticipate having a gun for. Now, I think it's fair to say we all know far more people who have extreme anger issues. You already fit that profile to some extent. But how many people would you profile with the description of, say, thinking irrationally, often speaking or acting on impulse, having aggressive tendencies, especially while drunk or intoxicated in some way, which many people do often, especially in the world of might makes right, which is where a lot of these people stem from, being vindictive and taking any negative comment directed at them way too personally, going by their instincts which tell them the world is out to get them, people who want to be paranoid, who are angry at life, and want to think everyone has a problem with them, want to feel they can stay in control, want to have that power when they're confronted with someone they found the opportunity to have a problem with, to grab the gun and do what they would call putting people back in their place if they fuck with you. With all that said, I've been to school. In fact, I've been to public school. I've met some people, I've seen some people, and I'm sure you have, who you could always tell about to find themselves in some situation at some point with someone they didn't need to kill, who they never thought deeply about killing, who might just have tipped them off at the wrong time under the wrong circumstances, probably because they tend to put themselves under those circumstances. People who are angry at the world, maybe antisocial problems, maybe anger issues, maybe spoiled brats who live in entitlement, dislikable losers who are mad that no one appreciates their attitudes. Maybe you could make out a whole list of people who come with a combination of these repulsive attributes, a loud minority we all have a hard time ignoring. The practice of self-defense, the concept of self-defense, to a lot of them lenses anyone who fucks with them. That's the reasoning that's spread throughout communities of uneducated and usually poor people. These people also tend to live in a dangerous world, hence looking out for yourself and asserting dominance being naturally a huge concept they're taught from an early age to take seriously. There is a world of the uneducated in almost every neighborhood. That's why parents are concerned over which crowds their kids hang around. That's why parents tell their kids which signs to pick up on to know who to avoid. The practice of revenge in these cultures is almost essential. Not getting scammed a second time. Not risking the reputation of being someone others can take advantage of. These things could depend on them having the reflex, someone pissed me off, I retaliate. And these people will get pissed off at some point. Point is, these people should not have guns, and there are so many of them. Yet you don't picture any of these people deciding to rob some non-troublemaker as well as kill them for whatever reason. Yet you could perfectly imagine them picking a fight at a bar, or committing domestic abuse one night over some argument with their girlfriend, probably about their toxic relationship. You might be lucky enough to see it in the school cafeteria if it doesn't happen at home. You could imagine what goes on with your average person who definitely shouldn't have a gun when they face a heated argument with some girl they're with. Things don't even need to escalate that far, turn into a shit-talking battle for instance, to figure common sense might hit at the right time, and the idea of being dumped on the streets might have to be delivered to someone who won't necessarily take it that well, in what may not be the best condition. And we all know what happens from there. Vindictive loser gets rejected, has to blame it on someone because it just can't be their fault, and whose fault is it gonna be? Well, at least one of two people, ex-girlfriend, if not just girl who rejected them, or the next guy that ex-girlfriend picks up. People get really defensive over girls, especially in the world of violence and poverty, which sadly exists as a subset of pretty much every neighborhood. Now, between the people you know who are maybe slightly fucked in the head and have a very nasty character with aggressive tendencies, those grouped with the people most ingrained in the might makes right world. If you take all those whom you could easily picture committing violence who would nevertheless, once they reach adulthood, be allowed to purchase a weapon under the Second Amendment, do they at all compare on a quantitative level to those who might take themselves upon a random stranger to rob them as such? Does it sound plausible that a fraction of murder cases involving your average person who you wouldn't expect to see selling drugs to kids at a bus stop because it just does match their lifestyle, does it sound plausible that this fraction would be significant enough to even be worth taking into account? Is it even practical enough to bother driving to a gun store to get a free gun for the statistical odds favoring the chances it might ever come into use? Would the cost of completely disregarding the potential benefits to the Second Amendment even prove meaningful in any capacity? Would this downside outweigh the overall impact that banning the Second Amendment may have, given everything there is to be considered, given the overall influence that amendment has had on the lives of those who it's affected? How would this compare to other similar first world countries such as France, which don't have the Second Amendment? How would you describe this influence from a first-hand idea of what it might be, and how would this compare with the objective reality outlined by the data collected from documenting such incidents on a large scale? Now, I don't pay much attention to the discussion on firearms, and that's honestly because doing research isn't really my thing. Smoking weed and being lazy are my things, as you could tell, and yeah, again, educated instead of becoming gay just doesn't quite fit my character. Nevertheless, I am indeed challenging your position on firearms because I don't think it will ever be appropriate again to bring my lack of preparation and retardation to the test against your scrutiny and have a legitimate excuse for doing so. And as it turns out, one retard is in luck here, since this retard happens to be from France, and it's not very intellectually challenging to observe how a similar country handles the issue of self-defense without the Second Amendment. Now, I'm not proud to say I'm one of them, but I'm definitely glad to know most of them won't be seeing a firearm anytime soon. Because as someone who's lived in France, I could only imagine from my experience having to interact with them for years I did from 2015 to 2016, what a weaponized France would have been like. I'd venture to guess they'd make their own version of American football out of cops surveilling the schools like they have here in Louisiana, where you wrestle the cop and score probably more hits than most school shooters already average in places like the United States, where unlike France, school shootings actually happen. Not that they make up much of the numbers done by firearms anyway, as mentioned, but it's still a nice perk. I guess that's always a way to look at it. But in fact, there's an entirely different mindset when it comes to being approached by an unwanted individual and finding yourself in a threatening situation. In France, nobody needs a firearm because that's not the way they go by defending themselves. In France, if someone feels intimidated, if they feel the need to know they can defend themselves for some reason, they simply get in shape. That way, they know what will happen if someone tries to mess with them. And when someone does try to mess with the wrong person, they just take a beating and fuck off because they don't have a weapon, so what the fuck else are they gonna do anyway? And they don't think of getting one because that's really only a thing over here. And from what I've observed, that's enough to change the entire process that would, over here, develop into a gun gone wrong incident. The reason for this is the mentality that comes with the way we handle the risk of falling into such a situation. Over here, the notion of firearms, as well as the role they play in our society, has entirely shaped our perception of keeping ourselves safe. The mindset that makes us attribute guns to self-defense simply doesn't exist over there, and guns are replaced with fists most of the time. And it seems they usually do a pretty fair job at both making your point and avoiding someone else's without the overkill aspect guns would add, along with not much else aside from a good excuse to stay morbidly obese, I guess. Now, there are other ways I haven't mentioned to go around not having a gun. There are some techniques, and I'm sure you'd know about some of them if you lived in foreign places with culture and shit. Like in Karate Kid, where the guy hypnotized his adversary for like 3 seconds. Yeah, you could do that shit. That could work. You could use a pickaxe. You know what? I guess since I have a lot of cultural experience and all of it actually comes from playing Minecraft with all types of epic gamers of every culture, making my cultural experience therefore more epic, I thought I'd end this by taking it upon myself to show you some of these alternatives, because there are healthier ways to end a dispute than in prison or game ended on the spot. Both spots suck shit, so you probably don't want to end up having to say in either of them. Truth is, there are better L's to take, there are better weapons to use, there's always better ways to handle a dispute, and we're just getting into them, which is why, as always, the debate offer is on the table, and as always, the boxing match is also on the table, if you ever want to disagree with me. In person. Box me on a tree, find me on the roof. Dude, what it, fuck, this is not what I was trying to, find me on the roof.